The following podcast contains adult language and themes. Listener discretion is advised.
So far on this show, we've talked about death every season, and from several angles like loss, grief, fear, and beauty. Recently, a woman reached out to talk about her new career path, being a death doula. A job title and duties we were completely unaware of. So what is a death doula? Why do they exist? Are they going to become more of a mainstay in the future? We're here for answers to those questions and more as we unpack this topic today.
Get ready to challenge your own opinions and ideas, because these folks are going there. Taboo topics are back on the table.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm actually excited about today's topic, and I know that seems weird. This is the one that everyone avoids for good reasons, but we're going to talk about why it shouldn't be avoided. And I'm passionate about this because death is directly connected to life and living and passions and values and all the things we're going to discuss. And I am even more excited to introduce today's guest.
I am Nicole Hoover. I am a death doula.
What is a death doula?
So, in short form, a death doula is essentially an end-of-life caregiver, a project manager for everything related to death.
Most people nowadays are familiar with like a regular doula for birth, like a midwife kind of a thing. I think a lot of people might hear the term and make 100 different assumptions. Have you gotten that? They think you're Jack Kevorkian, maybe?
That is 100% the first thing that I get is that I must really have a passion for Dr. Kevorkian, or that I am Dr. Kevorkian, or that I kill people. None of that is true.
Yeah. Well, at least not professionally.
Correct.
I'm just kidding. Like I said, I know that this is people's least favorite topic. You probably understand that even more so. But avoiding it doesn't help. It's not that you should make peace with it early in your life. I don't think you should. But for example, there's lots of cultures out there, past and present, who view death very differently. Like one, for example, is Mexico has the Day of the Dead. They honor death. And they don't view it as the end, but the transition to the next step of life. And it's something to be celebrated, something to be discussed. And there's other cultures who do the same thing. Not our culture. My God. I used to love to pull quotes, so I did for this one too, because Mark Twain is one of my favorite humans who ever existed. And he said, "I do not fear death. I had been dead for billions and billions of years before I was born and had not suffered the slightest inconvenience from it." I mean, that's a great way of looking at it, but there's other ways of seeing it. Even just talking to friends and family, not necessarily clients, the avoidance. What discussions have you had or what have you observed?
Oh, goodness. We avoid it like the plague. Even in my own family, my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer in May of 2023. And I remember, I can honestly close my eyes and still remember that night. And the emergency room doctor kind of turned the screen towards me so I could read the CT report. And my mom got up to go to the bathroom, and he came over and immediately just wanted to hug me. And in some situations, I'm very black and white. And I looked at him and I said, just give me what I'm looking at. Just give me the data. Give me the time frame. I just need that black and white. And here's an emergency room doctor who was very taken aback by the fact that I wanted the information. I wanted that direct, give it to me straight.
Did he think you were a sociopath?
Probably. Probably.
What happened?
She fought a very very hard battle. We went through chemo, radiation, surgery, you name it. And unfortunately, last January, she passed away.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Was that the catalyst?
There's always been this weird thing for me with death. My first job was a nursing home doing the laundry. And I'd come up from the basement and I'd be walking down the halls and bedroom doors would be open and I would see these white sheets pulled up top. And at 15 and a half, oh, Tom must be taking a long nap this morning. It took a few residents before it clicked for me. But I would say that there was definitely, with my mom's passing, that pretty much was the straw that changed the trajectory of where I am today.
Looking at death objectively, and by the way, there might be people who look at this and go, this is kind of macabre. Are you saying like death is cool? No, it sucks. Death is horrible. Losing people is awful. I'm far more afraid of other people's deaths than my own, though. And I think that's a rare thing because it's bred in us to survive. Anytime, like I'm watching right now some of these shows that have this, Armageddon type thing and people are all trying to survive. And maybe this sounds really bad, but I'm like, why at that point? What kind of life are you going to have? I think the difference between people who accept death as a natural end and people who will fight it with every ounce of their being is the people who are who value the life that you are living that leads to it versus just staying alive to stay alive. Like we're so concerned with death, but are we concerned with living our lives?
This path has definitely changed my perspective on life in general. And I try to live with the motto of no regrets any longer. And that's really hard to do. But every night I sort of reconcile myself at the end of the day, making sure that I've lived a good day. And if I die tomorrow, does my family know that I love them? Do my friends know that I care? Am I a good human being? And so it certainly has changed my outlook on life as a whole.
Earlier this season, actually in our very first episode, a psychologist talked about something that she asks all of her clients when talking about values and living genuinely and authentically. She said, picture your funeral. And what do you hope people would say about you, or what do you believe they would say about you? And I think that's a really good exercise in living true to your values. It's no one's fault that you're in the rat race and you're just trying to get through each day. You're trying to get those bills paid. You're trying to keep your kids fed. That is all that's just a fact of life, right? But the type of life we live, are we thriving or are we just surviving? And I think that's important for each person to unpack for themselves. That said, I am going to put you in the hot seat for a second. What do you believe people would say at your funeral, or what would you want them to say? Either one.
For my kids, I think that they never went a day without knowing that I love them 100%. Friends and acquaintances, that I am the person that would show up. If you need something, I am going to show up.
You believe that or you hope that?
I believe that.
That's great. And so your two big values, I assume, are making sure that you love and show up for the people you care about. That's why you have no regrets. I hate to simplify it as black and white and sociopathic. That's why you have no regrets. So when you talk to people about death, whether it's the person who's dying or the family around them, and I'm sure sometimes it's already happened by the time you get there, what are people most concerned about from your stance?
For some, it's the family being afraid to ask what the loved one wants or how they want to be remembered or what do they carry on. And I think some of that fear comes from the fact that if we talk about it, that means it's going to speed it up. Second, I would say if I give up on X, Y, and Z, whether it's chemo, dialysis, what have you, is the higher power going to look at me that I failed?
Wow. Yeah, that's a tough one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we've talked about that on the show. We've had chaplains and palliative care experts, and that is such an existential moment, and to only ask it at the end. And it takes somebody with true love to be able to give them the answers that they need to hear, which is just like, no, you're loved. You did your best. I mean, what else can you tell them?
And I'm not going to have all of the answers, right? I'm still here on this earth. I'm living and breathing. I can't guarantee what's coming on the other side for every single person. And so it's not about always having the answers. It's about being present and honestly just listening with intention. And I think for some people who are on that path of death, they don't want to burden their family. And so they just want someone to be able to sit and listen to these thoughts to give them some sense of peace.
Yeah. That's beautiful. And that's exactly it. Are you like me? You have to be this way. I think we discussed this offline. Are you more comfortable at a funeral than a wedding these days?
I would say yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't remember if I said this to you or someone else, because that sounds kind of weird. And it maybe sounds like I hate weddings. I'm like, I don't hate weddings. I did used to film weddings years ago. And I got to tell you, unless you're doing something new or different, it all is the same event to me. But there is something that is so genuine about how people act at a funeral that you don't ever get to see. It's a peek into like the authentic psyche of humans without the veil and the mask. And weddings are great. And I'm not cynical to say I see two people standing up there and saying they're in love, and I'm not saying they're full of shit. I'm saying I also understand that we are just also kind of putting on a skit for everyone, and knowing from my own past, but historically and from data, like most marriages aren't gonna last until death do they part. So there is something that is like genuine, people mourning. I don't want my funeral to be the first time people show me that they love me or show me that I'll be missed. And so I think the way that we build our relationships now is so important. Not so that we can have a great funeral. That's not what I'm suggesting. But to live true to who you are and who you want to be in the end, I think is really important. Now we're going to talk about something far more depressing. What did you do before you became a doula?
Oh, it's a good thing that there's just a few of us in this room. So prior to becoming a death doula, I was in corporate America as human resources.
You and I discussed that, and it's funny because, of course, I know lots of people in HR, and HR has its place, but the human element of HR has all but disappeared.
Why do you think I made the transition? If we're going to go there, I'm going to go there. I just felt towards the end of my career in HR that being focused on KPIs and turnover and metrics and whatnot just wasn't filling my cup. And as I was navigating through being a caretaker to my mom and my paternal aunt, and having to travel for work still and listen to the daily grievances and what have you, and then go home and be managing the downward spiral of two people that I immensely cared about. After everything transpired, I lost my aunt, and then obviously I lost my mom last year. I just got done and said, this this isn't the path for me. I am too heart focused to be sitting in an ivory tower.
This is an important part of the conversation for so many reasons. But again, we're talking about living true to your values and with the end goal in mind of, again, I want to have lived a full and good life being loved and loving people. And corporate America is the death of the soul. And of course, that doesn't mean every person out there listening who works for a corporate job has no soul whatsoever. But the higher you climb the ladder in most corporate environments, the more you realize your goals are all, again, KPI focused and getting that promotion and getting a raise and making more money. And all of those things are great. But it cannot be what you live for. I've made a lot of videos for companies over the years. And when we work with the HR team, we'll ask in interviews, what's your favorite part about the job? And the cliche that you hear so many times is, we're all a big family here. And I'm like, really though? Like a dysfunctional family, sure. But you're saying you would like stay here regardless of something else. No, like you're a paid person. You're here because you want your life to be better. And that's okay to admit that. But corporate America has this double-edged sword of trying to say, we want you to be loyal to us. But by the way, we're going to screw you over the first chance we get. And then when across the board over the last few years, DE&I were cut out of all HR initiatives, just about. Not every company followed suit. I think that was, would you agree that was maybe the last straw of humanity being lost in HR? Or are you afraid to give an answer?
Oh, no, I'm not afraid to give an answer. No,
Okay.
no. I think well before any D&I initiatives, the heart, the human side has been gone from corporate America long before DEI became a big focal point.
Yeah. Okay. So what does being a doula look like? Who contacts you? When? How? What do you show up and do? Are they expecting like the scene from The Exorcist where you're going to show up in the
with my holy water?
Yeah, exactly. Where you're standing outside under the light in the street. What does it look like?
For each client, Matt, it looks incredibly different. For one, it's showing up and just doing tasks. Any type of project management, being present and listening. For another family, it's my mom just needs someone to talk to, and she might want to talk about things that we don't want to know.
Are these typically people who have already gotten a diagnosis that says it's coming?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. In an ideal world, when someone receives a terminal diagnosis, a death doula would be part of their plan. But more often than not, it's a lot of the 11th hour type phone calls where you know that it's going to be a matter of days or even weeks. And there's just this final conflict that needs some level of resolution that I get brought in for, which does make the human resources side of me a good fit for it.
Yeah. So you sit down the family and you give them their status report and their annual evaluation, say, you guys messed this whole thing up. No, I'm kidding.
I did have a situation where we were doing a debrief afterwards, and it was for a mother/wife that was walking the path of a terminal diagnosis. And I had to be very direct with a certain individual and say, for 40 plus years, this woman has been running your household. She raised 5 or 6 kids, homeschooled them, was in charge of every decision. And now she's walking this path where she has no control. She has no control over what's happening to her. You need to take a step back and acknowledge that and give her some things that she can still feel that she's in control of. So for that, it was definitely some conflict resolution and just step back a bit and let her feel that she still has a piece of this household that she can manage.
Right. Again, it's not any one person's fault. It's a societal issue that we are essentially driven to avoid all of this and not think about it, because who is going to think oh my gosh, mom's dying, let's go hire a death doula? Nobody thinks that. They don't even think let's talk to a priest or anything. It's a combination of all of the things on top of the stages of grief, like what is that, the Kubler-Ross model?
Yes.
So you're going through all of this, and each person might be in different stages at the same time. Of course, no family is going to have this person who's just like, oh, by the way, guys, you know what we need? I'm not saying no one, but of course it's going to be 11th hour, because it's not something that we deem important right now. And so you do a lot of really great things. One of them that you talked about is legacy work. What's legacy work to you?
And I'm going to try to get through this without crying.
If you cry, that's great. We're making a reel out of it. We're going to promote the shit out of it.
I'm usually I shouldn't say I'm usually stoic, because I've been known to bring on the waterworks. Legacy work is something I'm grossly passionate about. There's an adage out there that says a person dies twice. So once in the physical sense, second when nobody speaks their name any longer. And so what are we doing currently to keep those loved ones' memories alive? Whether it's writing down stories of your grandfather's experience in the war, or for me personally, I fucked up and my mom made spaghetti and meatballs forever. I mean, I've grown up on it. My 3 kids have grown up on it. And when she got that diagnosis, in the back of my head, I knew I need to write this down. I need to get this recipe from her, because I need to keep this tradition alive.
Yeah.
Not knowing what legacy work was.
Right.
And unfortunately, she was in a lot of denial on where the disease was and how it was progressing. And so unfortunately, we never were able to sit down and do that together. And so legacy work for me is just mission critical. And it's making sure that we're documenting these stories. So I went and bought some fancy camera equipment and lights and microphones to offer legacy reels. So sitting down with a loved one, or even it doesn't have to be a terminal diagnosis. It could be your parents. Tell me your origin story. Tell me all of the things. And that way there's some type of documentation of the things that we don't think about that we want to remember. So I just literally sat down with my in-laws 3 weeks ago.
And you're like, before I kill you.
No, I love my in-laws. They're great. I wanted to know their history. I mean, next year they're going to be married 60 years.
Wow.
So talk to me about your love story and how that conversation went. Again, using my HR hat. I'm good with, leading questions and not just yes, no answers. We talked about all sorts of things, and even about my husband, his 2 sisters, which I'll probably have to do some editing on, but things also that my kids will be able to have and to remember. As I started doing this and getting the camera equipment, I kept thinking about my paternal grandfather, who always was tapping something, tapping his feet, his hands, whistling, what have you. And now I look at my own children, and my oldest will walk around the house whistling. And I just wish that I could have captured that so my oldest could see where some of his mannerisms come from.
That's what I'm talking about. That it's so important that you, working in the vicinity of death, has given you all of the insights in life. And those 2 things are very much connected. And the fact that, and I can say honestly, I'm horrible at doing that. I'm so bad at taking behind the scenes photos, of really documenting and being present in some of these moments, because naturally that's how I'm wired. But also as a video producer, I'm always thinking about the end product. I'm not thinking about all of the things that get us there and actually enjoying some of it sometimes. And so it's to no one's fault. I think it's very much a cultural thing, but I think that's really important. I think even with death out of the equation, taking the family videos, taking pictures where you're not just taking a picture, making the duck face and doing selfies, like actually capturing the moment, the candid moments. We're bad at that.
We are. And that's why in what I do, I want to be able to tell families, I want to be able to scream it from the mountaintop. When you have a loved one that has a terminal diagnosis, you are instantly in that caregiver mode. And so you're processing the diagnosis, you're processing, oh my gosh, is the house listed in transfer on death? How is the car listed? Oh my God, am I on the bank accounts? All of these things that are important. I'm not saying that they're not important, but the important things, Nona's favorite meatball recipe, or listening to Uncle Joe's war stories from Vietnam, or again, the origin story of how your parents met. You just don't sit down and pause for a second to think about those things that you're going to want to make sure you have when they're gone.
So would you say that ultimately the family of the soon-to-be deceased is more of the client than the person dying, or is it kind of a mixture?
I would say it's a mixture.
I know that there's no exact example, that all of these instances have their own context and characters, cast of characters, all these things. Walk us through the initial, I guess, onboarding, to use an HR term, of the death doula. So I call you and I'm like, hey, somebody recommended you. My grandmother's dying and I feel like our family needs help. We're very disorganized and we're just afraid we're going to mess this up. Take it from there.
So again, very similar to the HR side. I'll even think of it as recruiting and sitting down with a hiring manager who has an open position. Like, let's sit down and do an intake. So that's what I basically call it, is an intake form. I want to know the diagnosis. How did we get here? What is the care plan? Have they called hospice yet? Because that's a whole other conversation, right? There's a lot of people that don't like to say the D word, and they certainly don't like to say the H word.
Right.
So what's the care plan? Where are they? Are there any family dynamics that I need to know about before I walk in? I had one where the husband did not know that the daughter had hired me to come in and sit with. Mm-hmm.
That must have gone great.
Yes. So, but it in the end, it worked out how it was
Sure.
supposed to. But that's typically what it starts off as. What do you need from me? What are some of the heavy hitters that I can help take care of? What are some of the roadblocks, missteps? And I'll ask about advanced directives and, hey, have you thought about going to the bank? Have you talked to a financial advisor? Things of that nature.
Now, because of the nature of what you do and it being a specialty and also being a rare thing right now today in our culture, of course, the family who calls you, at least somebody's with it, right? Otherwise, they would have never reached out. But what we've talked about so far, for the most part, is families and friends and people around somebody dying who love them and are going to miss them and want to capture some things for posterity, whatever. What about the families and friend groups where, like, we've all known that, where there's some, like, I've been estranged from my father and he's dying. And really, I'm doing this for my mom or my siblings or something like that. What happens in those situations where it's not like, oh, I want to make sure that we capture and have all these awful memories from my childhood. Have you run into anything like that so far?
Knock on wood, not yet.
But that is such a common thing. It wasn't long ago. I was at a funeral, and there were many mixed feelings around the room. Now, everybody showed up, which is important. And the one thing I said, and not that my voice is important, but I hugged somebody there who I know, and I said, everything you're feeling right now is valid. That's the only thing I could think to say in the moment. I didn't want to say, I'm so sorry for your loss. Of course I said that. But it was really like, I'm sorry you're having to go through this. And I realize that a lot of people take on the guilt of why do I feel relieved? Or why am I not sadder? Or I still feel petty because I'm holding on to this one thing. So even though you haven't had to or gotten to professionally deal with that, what would you say to those people?
So as you were walking through that example, my mom and I, we had our own challenges in life. I will say that I did not have a white picket fence upbringing, so much so that I'm probably going to, that's my 2027 goal, is to write a book about how fucked up my life was. And
those are the best books.
I'm telling you, it's going to be great. It's going to be a page turner. And there was a period of time that we didn't talk for close to a year, and I had already had 2 kids at that point, and a situation had changed, and I let her back into my life, and she moved 2 or 3 miles from my house. And fast forward then 15, 16 years, we're walking this path of cancer. And I know there were things that she wanted to say to me, and we just never had that conversation. I also had people in my life when my mom was going through treatment and all of the things, and I was front and center. I mean, I was it, essentially. You don't have to be doing that because she was so shitty to you growing up. You don't have to do that. And as we neared the end, I looked at my husband one day and I said, I don't know how I'm going to feel after she dies. And he said, you're probably going to have some sense of relief. And that night that we got the phone call, it was just this swirl of emotion, of relief, of honestly, there was a little guilt, sadness, all of the things. But when you talked about the sense of relief, I did have that for a moment of, not only because she was out of pain, but
for yourself,
for myself as the caregiver. I mean, I was burning the candle from both ends and beyond.
And that's something that a lot of people are unwilling to admit. They don't want to be labeled as, somebody who doesn't care, or a sociopath, or someone holding on to hate. I think your feelings as a human, I'll say this to everybody, your feelings in death, someone's death, unless you caused it on purpose with malice, are all valid. Because again, we spend so much time avoiding it. When somebody dies, the instinct is, well, now we're only going to talk about them in a flowery sense. And it's like, no, they're still the same fucked up person they were before they died. But they can be both. We're not all great or all shitty. Most of us are nice old combination of both, and all the shades of gray in between. What do people ask you the most? So you have people who are like, obviously in chaos, right? By the time you get a call, it's chaos. That black and white answer that you wanted in the hospital, I'm sure some of them want from you. What's a common question that you get up front from them?
How much longer do you think so-and-so has?
Even though
I'm non-medical.
And you don't know anything other than what they shared with you.
Correct.
And that's what I was curious about, because I think when you are out at sea in the storm and you have no idea which way you're going, you want somebody to give you some kind of information, reassurance, a compass, something. I'm assuming you get a lot of questions that are things that you could not possibly answer. Do you think she's going to go to heaven because she did?
Right.
Right?
Do you think she's in pain? Again, how much longer do you think he can hold on for? I don't know. And what makes, especially for that question, I feel, how long do you think my loved one is going to hold on for? There is something to be said about the life that you've lived and what your dying process looks like. I think I look at my mom and my aunt. My aunt had her shit together, Excel files of passwords and whatnot. And once we knew the dialysis wasn't working, it was, okay, you tell Father Steve I don't want X, Y, and Z. And as she started the transition process, I won't say it was 100% peaceful. She had a little bit of what's called terminal agitation, but in retrospect for me, I would say peaceful. And then I look at my mom, who we didn't have these difficult conversations that needed to be said. And she lingered. I mean, the night that I checked her into hospice, the hospice nurse said, "Oh, you should stay tonight, Nick, because tonight's going to be the night." And I said, no, it's not. And she lingered for another 3 weeks. And in my heart, I believe it was because of the life that she led, that her brain wasn't done reconciling what she needed to, and she held on. And so when I think about other family situations or client situations, if that person still has some bad juju lingering and there's a conversation that didn't get said, I think that time frame on when is Grandpa Joe going to die is going to look a lot different than someone who has their affairs in order, no conversations were left unsaid. I think when you see a lot of that agitation and lingering, it's because their brain is still processing some of the things that they didn't get to say.
I have to imagine there is something that is part of us that we can't see or touch that is also like, no, you cannot move on you cannot make that transition without getting this off your chest. This will carry into the next phase if you don't get it. That's just my personal belief. When it comes to wills and living wills and all of these things, are you involved in that process at all?
I have a client that I'm working with that I've taken her to her attorney to make sure that her affairs are up to date and in order. I worked with a client, albeit brief, about a month and a half ago, and I put together a super huge checklist of, okay, let's make sure we have this updated. Let's make sure we have that updated. And I think for the average person, it doesn't have to be someone who's walking a path of a terminal diagnosis. We have these papers, we stuff them in a drawer, we don't think about them. Now, my end of life wishes at 25, of course they were going to say, crack my ribs, do whatever crazy, funky shit you have to, you know?
Keep me alive, right?
100%. Now, when I'm 85 and I'm probably dealing with osteoporosis or whatever, am I going to want them cracking my ribs to maybe live another month? Absolutely not.
Right.
And so I think for a lot of people, us healthy people, right? You and I don't sit here and think about our wills and advanced directives on a day-to-day basis.
Not at all.
And so that's also something that I try to lead and guide on. Even normal, healthy people. Hey, you may want to revisit what your stuff looks like, or when was the last time you updated your will? I just sat with my in-laws in November, and my mother-in-law, now that I've been on this path, she's very much can you look at this? Can you look at this? Can you look at this? And she pulled out her will, and the first 2 digits of the signature date were 19. And I said, okay, there's been a lot of life changes since then. You have grandbabies, what have you. So it's really, as we sit and change our smoke detector batteries every year, these are things that we need to pull out of the drawer and dust off.
Or at least every few years.
Yes.
Right?
And talk to your people about your wishes.
Yeah.
Talk to
That's
them.
really important.
Oh my gosh. Absolutely.
Because, they exist for that very reason. And we've discussed this on the show before. But, people going, this is what she would want. This is what he would want. Well, actually, we know what that person wanted because we have it documented. But that would make it tricky if it's like, yeah, but that was 30 years ago.
Correct.
They said they want a Bill Cosby quote on their tombstone. I don't think they want that anymore.
That's not going to age very well.
We need to really rethink this. I agree. And it's something, again, I'm a hypocrite because I'm so bad at this. I did have a living will. I don't have one anymore. Now, I'm not married and I don't have children. So if I die, I just want to make sure the government doesn't get my shit. I want people I care about to have it. So ransack my home if I die, to all of you out there who like me. What's your favorite story so far?
Oh boy, there's 2 in particular that come to mind. Last fall, I was working with a family, and I wasn't quite sure what exactly they needed from me. And on one of my last visits there, Mom was in and out of lucidity. And so about 15 minutes into the visit, I went and sat in the kitchen with a few of the kids. And I don't know what prompted me to ask this question, but I said, I feel like there's something that you guys want to know, but are afraid to ask. And the one child.
From you or from?
From Mom.
Gotcha.
And they wanted to know about Thanksgiving and Christmas traditions, but were afraid to ask. What do you want kept alive? What are some things that you'd want to make sure that we're doing once you're gone? And so a few minutes later, I hear this like scratching or movement sound, and it was coming from the room that my client was in. And the children had indicated, oh, she's letting you know that, or she's letting us know she's still here, she's still kicking. And I said, I'm gonna go back in and chit chat. And so we sat down and started talking about Thanksgiving and pecan pie with a caramel drizzle. And I know, right? You're going to hear my stomach growling. And we talked about Christmas traditions, white lights and light up reindeer and lights on the mantle and everyone's Christmas presents being wrapped the same. And I left and drove home that night. And when I got home, I just kind of took a moment to just process everything that we talked about. And opened my laptop and just started writing. I mean, writing everything that I could remember from the conversation. And the next day, I got a note from one of the kids and said, "Thank you. What you just gave us was an absolute gift. We would have never been able to sit down and listen like you did and captured the information that you did." And let me tell you, last Thanksgiving, I was on the struggle bus for a couple reasons, but I wish I would have made the stupid pie. Like, I wish I would have made the pie because it just sat with me so heavily that I was able to give this gift to those kids.
Is there an emotional toll that you take on in a lot of these? Most of the time, I'm sure you don't know these people whatsoever. I'm sure some of them maybe are friends of friends or something. But of course, you aren't a sociopath, so it's impossible for you not to get somewhat attached or emotionally involved. That assumption is right off the bat. but do you find it, good or bad, carrying with you longer than maybe you hoped it would or thought it would?
So as I mentioned, I'm a very heart first or heart forward person. And I've obviously talked about my mom and some of the craziness there. Honestly, Matt, when I leave a family, I feel like the Grinch at Christmas at the end where, you see his heart just expanding. That's what I feel. Do I feel a sense of sadness? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I also feel that it fills my heart knowing that I know I made an impact. I have zero doubt that I made an impact with that family. And so while there is some level of sorrow, it also fills this grief that I still have.
Yeah. That's beautiful because it might be the most important impact that you could have possibly made, not just in that moment, but that is the legacy of that person and all of those relationships. And had you not been there, who knows? And if nothing else, I'm sure that has helped some people get closure. And that's huge. If you can do that, that's huge. Mark Twain said, "The fear of death follows from the fear of life. A man who lives fully is prepared to die at any time." I love that quote because it's true. And you and I talked about that when we first met and we're talking through this, like, what do we want to cover in this episode? It's weird because you don't meet a lot of people who have no regrets. I'm one of them. And I think a lot of people would question that. Like, you don't want to, it's like, I'm happy with the person who I am. And if something's bothering me, I don't stay quiet to a fault. So regret is not something in my being because I will not let something go by. Even if I'm like, yeah, that was shitty. I shouldn't have done that. I maybe learned a lesson from it. I made it up to the person who maybe was at their expense. How do other people get to a place of no regrets? Or is it just you and I are predestined and we're wired that way? Because I don't think that's actually true.
Well, I think what's important is that you have to have some level of self-awareness. And that's something that not a lot of people inherently have or care about, I should say.
Yeah.
And I think it took me walking this journey to become a death doula, to try to live as fully as humanly possible. Are there still things that I probably screw up on? Yes. Just this weekend, I am trying to fix a wrong and sent a text to a person and said, I was an asshole and I'm sorry. And I would love it if we could get together and fix this. But I think it takes being self-aware of what you want out of life and the path that you want to walk, to be able to try to live with as minimal regrets as humanly possible.
See, that's why this topic is so important and why I hope people haven't avoided listening or watching this, because it's not, yes, it's about death, but it's not about the doom and gloom of death. It is really about how to live a life so that when your time comes, you aren't passing on with all of this regret and turmoil and anxiety. Of course, because there's already naturally going to be some of that there. It's the unknown. Some people see that as scary. Some people see that as beautiful. It can be both. But if you aren't living your life authentically now in that self-awareness and righting the wrongs, all you're doing is sweeping it under the rug. That shit is still there. And then if it's coming out in the 11th hour with all of this other added emotion, you're screwing future self there.
Absolutely. Some of the things that I try to post on social media talks about my passion for being able to work with families to help clear up that conflict. What's the best thing that's going to happen as a result of clearing out this conflict? What's the worst that's going to happen?
Yeah.
Why not throw it out there and see what happens? I had talk about the difficult conversations. I co-hosted a death cafe.
I was about to ask you about that. Not only am I intrigued because we only got a little bit of time to talk about it. I want to know more. To talk about the death cafe.
Well, I am going to have another one here soon, so I'll make sure that you get the invite. Death cafes overseas across the pond are far more popular.
Sure.
Because they're not so death adverse like we are in talking about death. Look at what Dr. Ruth did for sex. My God, here's this, tiny 4-foot, 80-year-old German woman talking to us about sex. And here we are, maybe finally starting to be more comfortable with it. So we hosted a death cafe. And I have a good friend who gave me it's called the Death Deck. It's actually a deck of cards. I highly recommend families who are struggling with conversations, pick up a death deck. I mean, flip through it. You're gonna get all these good prompts. But one of the questions in there was, if you could speak from beyond and tell a family member one thing, what would it be? And then subsequent to that, what's holding you back from doing it now? So these are kind of the things that we talk about in the Death Cafe.
Was it hard to sell it?
I mean, for being my first one in a very death adverse society, I think there was 10 to 12 of us.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
Highly tip the scale towards female?
Yes.
Yeah.
100%.
And I'm not saying that because you're a woman or because women are obsessed with death, but like I joke all the time with my other guy friends who are, self-aware, who care about mental health and stuff. I'm like, women should just kick up their feet for a little while when it comes to the emotional stuff because, they've been far more evolved and advanced than us for a long time. Like men really need to pick up the slack here and try to meet them. I'm sad to hear that it was like all women, but understandably so. There's going to be one guy at your next one. I'm going to try as soon as you give me the info. So is that the majority of it? You play with the deck of cards and everyone discusses, or are there other elements to it?
I've attended a few virtual death cafes. One that
virtual one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Is it can't be as impactful?
You know what? I'm very surprised, but they have been.
Wow.
One I attended as a death doula, and it was prior to my death cafe, and the gentleman hosting it was kind enough to let me sit in and observe. And then, of course, I had a million questions for him afterwards. But sitting in that one as a participant, we got into the conversation of medical aid in dying.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved listening to all the different opinions and viewpoints and questions and misinformation around it. So I think if you find a good one, they can be impactful virtually.
Where do you host these?
So any place that has a space that is going to feel like a neutral environment.
Yeah.
Libraries.
Yeah.
I'm definitely toying with the idea of hosting one at a funeral home. Like let's just put the dead fish on the table. But we'll see.
Because part of me is like a winery or a bar would be great, but that could go awry real quick.
A lot of emotions, maybe more than I'm ready to be navigating through, could come out.
I just feel like some people need that extra little bit of liquid courage.
Oh, sure.
But especially if you're talking men, it'd get real sloppy real fast and then loss of control as the host. We've touched on it, but we haven't said the word. I think capitalism is a major reason that we are death adverse because, one, these people have it in their minds as though they get to take it with them, the greedy. And the rest of us, if we don't focus on death, we focus on how we can be a contributing factor to society and to the GDP and all of those things. But if we were looking at it the other way around, we might suddenly start saying, you know what's a more precious resource is time or relationships or love. And this isn't a political stance. I'm just saying, like, we talked about HR. We talked about the death-adverse society and why we're so different. I think it is largely an American thing that we are so adverse to it. And then policies and other financial things put in place mirror that. So one of the things is some places give you a little bit of time off for a death in the family and things like that. But like FMLA doesn't cover the things that you would do.
I maybe just had a passive-aggressive LinkedIn post recently about, hey, corporate America that says they're a family culture. What are you really doing for these employees that are the primary caregivers of a dying loved one? Are you simply just handing them FMLA paperwork and saying, see you in 12 weeks or when your mom, your sister, your child, whomever dies? Why not bring in a death doula as part of your employee assistance programs? This is going to help separate you from every other business that's out there. Your employees don't want pizza on Fridays. I'm fucking telling you that right now. They don't care. Don't give them a turkey at Thanksgiving. They don't care about that either. But something like this, to where you bring in a death doula, you have an employee whose family member is dealing with a terminal illness, and there are studies out there from the National Institute of Health or on Health that 95% of the caregiving falls to family members. So why not bring in a death doula and say, here's this person. Give yourself some respite care while you're taking care of dad, mom, spouse, whatever. We will take care of the bill. That's what's going to separate you from the competition. It's not going to be your pizza parties. It's not going to be your ice cream trucks. It's not going to be your jeans on Friday. People don't care about that stuff. They want to be seen and they want to be felt that they're actually cared about.
And we've all been there or know somebody close who has gone through where a close friend or somebody who isn't their relative dies. They need time off to go to the funeral. And they're still in mourning. They can't function. Some people want the distraction, but a lot of people are like, I need some time. And the company is like, no, or burn your PTO or whatever. Right. So now I'm going back into the office with that resentment. And I'm looking at it going, I had a chance to like mourn and grieve and you took that away from me. Yeah, I'm going to give you my best now.
Yep.
And corporate America doesn't care because you're a number. So, it's a perpetual cycle though. And I think the more that people, again, even if they take away only one thing from what we're talking about, is like thinking about these things down the road. I think the more people who do that, the more they'll see the absurdity of our everyday functioning corporate capitalist America. Because you go, none of this shit's going to matter in the end. Nobody on their deathbed says, I wish I would have worked harder.
Oh my gosh.
Nobody on their deathbed said, I wish I would have made more money. Nobody on their deathbed said, I wish I would have climbed that ladder higher. What's everyone regret?
More time. More time with those that they love.
The relationships that failed, the way that they failed other people. It's all about humanity and that connection and that love. It is just that. And yet, if you were to make a documentary about the average human and you were an alien looking from the outside, you'd go, if this is what they're going to regret, why are they doing everything but working on that?
Right.
Again, I find it absurd. Now, I don't say that in a way of any of you who are doing that, you're absurd. No, it has been pounded into your head. It is a learned set of behaviors.
Absolutely.
How much more anxious and sad and regretful is your death going to be if you are avoiding this stuff and you are just going through the rat race and going, look, I'll deal with that at some point. I just have to get through today.
And then you kick that can to the next day. Then you kick that can again.
Until you kick the can.
Correct.
And then on top of everything, and we don't have to go deep down this rabbit hole, the cost of just burying somebody or just having a funeral. And I'm not calling out funeral homes or any specific thing, but like weddings now, like your average wedding costs tens of thousands of dollars minimum. That was unheard of when we were growing up. But now it's just what it is. And it's a ritual, folks. It is all a cultural ritual. And that's why with weddings having shot so many, I tell the people like who are planning it, do what's important to you. I don't care what grandma did. If that doesn't serve you, don't do it. It's about you. It's about your relationship. But, funerals aren't far behind that. And there are things that are necessary. But I think it's more important to spend money on like a death doula and the types of things that are going to last beyond that day of the burial. Capitalism's like, we're going to avoid talking and thinking about death, but also when it's time, oh boy, are we going to charge you an arm and a leg.
My mom had this notion in her head that it was only going to cost me $400 or $500 to take care of her after she died. And I think the one day we were probably sitting at chemo and I was on my 18th cup of coffee and I was like, Linda, it's going to cost me $500 just to probably transport you from like the hospital to the funeral home.
Yeah.
I just think that people don't realize all of the costs, all of the initial decisions that go into end of life planning.
Yeah.
I mean, when a loved one dies, within those first 24 to 48 hours, you have to make upwards of like 70 different decisions. Embalming, cremation, songs, no songs, graveside services, church services. Who are we going to have there? What do you want the little handout card to look like? So many things. And so going back to that whole, we're such a death adverse society. As you're sitting here now, or if there's a listener sitting out here and saying, oh shit, I have no idea what dad wants. Exactly.
Yeah.
Have the conversation, because what's going to happen if dad didn't want to be laid out and wanted to be cremated and you're having him embalmed and open casket? He is going to be haunting your ass from the great beyond.
Yeah.
Trust me. So that's why it's so important to just talk about these things and go down that path of advanced planning with a funeral home, because it's a costly event.
And really the onus is on each individual if you have somebody who's capable and cognizant and all these things. But that's why it's important to think about while you're still young and healthy, because when you die, the last thing you want to be is a financial burden on
Correct.
The people you leave behind, because they're already going to be going through an emotional and logistical one. So
Absolutely.
So really, like your decisions, your will, all of the things that you come up with, it is about taking care of the people around you so that they are not left with an even bigger gap and void in their life on top of what they're already going to experience in grief.
Your family's going to be mourning you. Do you really want them to be navigating probate?
Right.
As they're still grappling with the loss of you emotionally, physically, etc.
Yeah.
And now you're just leaving this wake of big things that they have to clean up without your input or guidance.
Before we wrap up, you had mentioned, and I haven't had a chance to read it other than just scan some things, but the Collected Regrets of Clover. You had mentioned that book and you said, if you get a chance, there's this novel, I think you should read it. Why would you recommend this to other people?
You and I have talked a lot about living with no regrets. And this book, I don't want to give too much of it away, but it is about a death doula and the things that she learns about from clients of regrets, joys. There's three different buckets. And I think for anyone out there that maybe wants to change their outlook on life, and maybe where do you begin on trying to live as a better human being with no regrets? I think that's a good book to start with because it's reflective. It is a good reminder of, she works with clients and asks, what were some things that they wish they would have done? And she lives her life on trying to do what that person didn't get to do to then fulfill their legacy. And so I just think as individuals don't know where to begin on being more self-aware and how to live better and maybe how to live with lesser regrets, I think that's a good place to start.
And despite the subject matter, the people describe it as hopeful, tender, and life-affirming. But what got me where I was like, yeah, we got to bring it up on this episode is the novel explores themes of life, death, love, grief, regret, and finding purpose, turning the taboo subject of death into a celebration of life. Beautiful.
Yes.
As that is how we should view death. Not saying it's still not sad, but it can be all of those things. Where would you like people to go to find you and or any other resources?
I'm out there on all of the social medias. I do not have a creative brain, and I kept it very simple. So I am Death Doula Nicole, Nicole, no H, no K. It's just Nicole. Super active on Facebook, very active on LinkedIn in targeting business professionals that are trying to navigate, taking care of a loved one. Instagram, I have a YouTube channel where I pop in some quick educational shorts about everything death doula related.
Is there anything we haven't discussed that you would like to share?
We're all going to walk this path. 10 out of 10 of us, we're going to die. And to the things that we've talked about earlier, just because we're going to talk about death doesn't expedite the process. I hosted a death cafe, as we briefly mentioned, and all of the people that came are still alive. Yes.
Wow.
I know, right? It's been a month. Everyone is still with us. Don't be afraid to talk about it. Get those skeletons out of the closet. Hug your family. Tell your people that you love them. Work on those broken relationships that are still kind of giving you the ick and sitting with you incorrectly. Because right now, we only live one life, and just grab it by the balls and be a good person.
The only person who can grab it by the balls and make it a beautiful statement. I love that about you. I'd like to ask a random question at the end that's slightly on topic. If you could be honored in any big way after you die, what would it be?
Can I be obnoxious?
Yeah.
I want a gym named after me.
Of all things, I could not have guessed that.
I think my self-care in life in general is working out, and I have a super big passion for it. I mean, I want to be here as long as humanly possible. I want to lift big things. I want to look like a girl who lifts. And so an honor would be that a local gym says, "Damn, did you see the traps on her? We should name a gym after her."
That's awesome. Listen, Nicole, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you for reaching out in the first place. And yeah, after we talked, even the first 5 minutes, I was like, oh, we're doing this episode because it's important. But the way you speak to it and the way that you look at it, I think is very profound. And so thank you for sharing your gifts, your stories, your experiences. I think anyone who listens to this with any kind of openness has some action steps they can take. And so to those of you out there who've watched or listened today, hopefully this is a catalyst for you to start talking about and thinking about those things. Yes, it can be depressing. It's a little macabre, but ultimately the goal is what? Live the best life you can, fix the relationships that are worth fixing. And in the end, you won't leave behind a big rat's nest of emotions and logistics for other people to try to untangle. And so if nothing else, this is your call to action to go out and live your life the way you authentically were meant to do. How do you want to go in the end, and what do you not want to leave behind when it comes to regrets? We'll see you next time.
We just went there. Now you can go to thegoingtherepodcast.com for links to all the podcast platforms, our socials, and of course, YouTube. While you're at it, give us a rating, share with a friend, and subscribe.
This podcast is brought to you in part by its host and Frame One Media, in association with Kaylee Williams, Joe Calley, and Bobby Thomas.